lampshades, book covers, gloves, all made from human skin. Not legend, not myth, real human skin, carefully selected from murdered prisoners for their tattoos. This wasn't the work of a mad scientist, but a woman. Her name was Ilse Koch, and she didn't just oversee horror. She engineered it. Known as the Witch of Buchenwald, she turned brutality into ritual, and suffering into spectacle. The only woman ever sentenced to life imprisonment for Nazi war crimes. In April 11, 1947, she sat in a courtroom facing trials for her war crime. However, as her story progresses, it becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish between fiction and reality. Was she really the monstrous person depicted in survivor accounts, or has time and propaganda increased her fame? Today, we uncover the chilling legacy of one of the most sadistic figures of the Nazi regime, and how justice, though delayed, finally caught up with her. This is not just history. It's a descent into pure evil. Early life and rise in Nazi Germany. Ilse Koch was born Margaret Ilse Kohler on September 22, 1906, in Dresden, a bustling city in what was then the German Empire. The third daughter of a factory foreman, Ilse grew up in a working-class family, her childhood marked by the economic struggles of post-World War I Germany. She was an ordinary girl in many ways, bright enough to complete elementary school and later train as a commercial clerk. By the 1920s, she was working as a secretary and bookkeeper, her days filled with mundane tasks like filing papers and balancing ledgers. But beneath this unremarkable exterior, something darker was brewing. The early 20th century was a turbulent time for Germany. The Treaty of Versailles had left the nation humiliated, its economy in shambles, and its people desperate for a savior. Then came in Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, promising to restore Germany's glory. In 1932, a year before Hitler seized power, Ilse joined the Nazi Party, drawn to its fiery rhetoric and vision of a racially pure, powerful Germany. For Ilse, the party wasn't just a political movement. It was a path to purpose, power, and privilege. The Nazi ideology placed women at the heart of its vision for a new Germany, but not in the way you might expect. Women like Ilse were seen as vital to creating an Aryan master race. Hitler believed that a larger, racially pure population would strengthen Germany's military strength and provide settlers for the vast territories he planned to conquer in Eastern Europe. Women were encouraged, sometimes coerced, to marry and bear children, with state incentives like marriage loans and the Cross of Honor of the German Mother awarded to those who had 4 or more children. But Ilse's role in the Nazi machine would go far beyond motherhood. In 1936, SS leaders established the state-run program known as Lebensborn, meaning Fount of Life. The Lebensborn Ordinance stated that every SS member was expected to father 4 children, whether within or outside of marriage. Lebensborn homes offered shelter to single mothers and their children, provided birth certificates and financial aid, and helped find adoptive parents for the children. Ultimately, however, the Lebensborn program was not heavily promoted, and only about 7,000 children were born in Lebensborn homes during its 9 years of operation. Instead, Nazi population policy focused more on promoting family and marriage. The state encouraged marriage through loans, gave financial supplements for each additional child, publicly recognized large families, awarded the Cross of Honor of the German Mother to women who bore 4 or more children, and imposed stricter penalties for abortion. Despite propaganda portraying women's roles as limited to motherhood and homemaking, German women played a crucial part in the Nazi movement. Of the roughly 40 million German women in the Reich, around 13 million were active in Nazi Party organizations, working as welfare workers, teachers, secretaries, nurses, auxiliaries in the military and police, and in various other roles including serving as guards in concentration camps. A minority of German women who opposed the regime's policies or were deemed biologically inferior faced persecution. Hundreds of thousands were forcibly sterilized, and tens of thousands were imprisoned in the camp system. One such camp was Sachsenhausen concentration camp, where in 1936 Ilse married its commandant, Karl-Otto Koch. marriage to Karl-Otto Koch, and entry into the camp system. In 1936, Ilse's life took a fateful turn when she married Karl-Otto Koch, a rising star in the SS and the commandant of Sachsenhausen concentration camp, located just outside Berlin. Sachsenhausen was one of the first major camps established by the Nazis, initially designed to detain political opponents, criminals, and other undesirables. By the end of 1936, it held around 1,600 prisoners, subjected to brutal conditions under Karl's command. Ilse, now in her late 20s, found herself at the heart of the Nazi camp system, working as a guard and secretary at Sachsenhausen. The marriage was a partnership forged in ambition and cruelty. Karl was a man driven by greed and power, while Ilse quickly adapted to the privileges that came with being the commandant's wife. In 1937, Karl was tasked with overseeing the construction of a new camp, Buchenwald, near Weimar, Germany. This sprawling facility would become one of the largest concentration camps within Germany's pre-war borders, a place of unimaginable suffering. Surrounded by electrified barbed wire, watchtowers, and machine gun-armed sentries, Buchenwald was a fortress of terror. Its main camp included wooden barracks, a crematorium, a brothel for SS guards, and the infamous bunker, a punishment block where prisoners were tortured and killed for even minor infractions. Ilse and Karl moved to Buchenwald, where they lived in a lavish commandant's house within the camp's grounds. On the edge of the camp, a luxurious mansion was built for the Koches, the Villa Koch. Constructed in 1938 by prisoners working under brutal conditions, the mansion was a grotesque display of stolen wealth. Originally budgeted at 40,000 Reichsmarks, the cost ballooned to over $500,000, funded through the confiscated money and possessions of murdered inmates. Inside the villa, nothing was spared. Fine furniture, chandeliers, imported carpets, and even a private zoo for the Koch children. To the outside world, it appeared charming, almost idyllic. But survivors would later describe it as a palace of cruelty, perched above a sea of suffering. Ilse lived in obscene comfort while just meters away, thousands of prisoners were worked to death. For Ilse, this was more than a home. It was a stage for her to wield power. While Karl managed the camp's operations, Ilse took on a role far beyond that of a typical SS wife. She wasn't content to stay in the shadows. Instead, she roamed the camp, her presence striking fear into the hearts of prisoners. Her reputation for cruelty spread quickly, earning her the chilling nickname, the Witch of Buchenwald. Ilse Koch's atrocities at Buchenwald. Buchenwald's prisoners were a diverse group: political dissidents, Jews, Jehovah's Witnesses, Sinti and Roma, and German military deserters, among others. They lived in squalor, subjected to starvation, forced labor, and relentless brutality. Ilse Koch thrived in this environment, her actions revealing a sadistic streak that shocked even some of her fellow SS members. She would memorize the identification numbers of prisoners she disliked and pass them to her husband, Karl-Otto Koch. He made sure they were beaten savagely or worse, eliminated. Her obsession with control and indulgence spilled into her surroundings. She commissioned lavish additions to their already opulent villa, including a private riding arena and stables to satisfy her love for horseback riding. These expansions were not constructed by skilled laborers. They were built by exhausted, starving prisoners, many of whom died from overwork or abuse, sacrificed for her leisure. While the camp around her became a hellscape of forced labor, starvation, and human experimentation, Ilse carefully curated an image of domestic bliss. She created a personal photo album filled with images of her children playing in the garden, family picnics, horseback rides, and even visits to the camp's private zoo, which housed exotic animals to entertain the SS elite. These photographs, seemingly innocent on the surface, stood in horrific contrast to the grim reality that surrounded them. Just beyond the frame of every smiling portrait, men and women were dying by the thousands. And as the years passed, whispers turned to rumors. Stories of Ilse's behavior grew even more depraved, and soon, the truth would begin to surface. One of Ilse's most infamous obsessions was with tattoos. She would ride through the camp on horseback, her eyes scanning prisoners for unique or striking tattoos. When she found one that caught her fancy, the prisoner's fate was sealed. They were sent to their deaths, but not before their tattooed skin was carefully removed. Ilse collected these gruesome relics, turning them into what she called her trophies. Lampshades, book covers, gloves, and handbags. Items crafted from human skin became her grotesque obsession. Survivors later testified that she displayed these items proudly, as if they were works of art. Her cruelty extended beyond her macabre collection. Ilse was known to target pregnant women, whipping them with a specially designed whip embedded with razor blades. The sight of their suffering seemed to fuel her. Children, too, were not spared. Witnesses recounted how she would laugh as young prisoners were marched to the gas chambers, her amusement a chilling contrast to their terror. Ilse's sadism wasn't limited to physical violence. She was a sexual deviant, organizing orgies with SS men and their wives and forcing prisoners into degrading acts for her entertainment. She would parade through the camp in revealing clothing, daring prisoners to look at her. Those who made eye contact were swiftly executed by guards on her orders. Ilse's behavior wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. She reveled in her power over life and death, using her position to humiliate and destroy. Rumors swirled that she had a lover, Dr. Erich Wagner, an SS doctor who shared her fascination with tattoos, believing they were linked to criminality. Together, they turned Buchenwald into a laboratory of horrors, where prisoners were not just victims but objects to be studied, exploited, and discarded. The downfall begins. Investigations and arrests. By 1941, the Koch's reign of terror at Buchenwald began to unravel. Their excesses caught the attention of Josias Waldeck, the higher SS and police leader for Weimar, who had supervisory authority over the camp. Waldeck's suspicions were piqued when he noticed the name of Walter Kramer, a hospital orderly who had once treated him, on the camp's death list. Kramer, along with another attendant, Karl P., had been killed on Karl Koch's orders, labeled as political prisoners. The real reason: they had treated Karl for syphilis, a condition he wanted to keep secret. Waldeck launched a full-scale investigation, uncovering a web of corruption and murder. The Kochs had been embezzling vast sums of money and possessions stolen from prisoners. Karl had even built an indoor riding arena for Ilse, costing over 250,000 Reichsmarks, and opened Swiss bank accounts with extorted funds. Another prisoner, an SS man named Kohler, was killed by Waldemar Hoven, an SS doctor and Ilse's alleged lover, to silence him as a potential witness. Hoven had injected Kohler with phenol, a method used in the camp's medical experiments. The investigation revealed that the Kochs had treated Buchenwald as their personal fiefdom, exploiting the Nazi system for profit and pleasure. While the Nazis turned a blind eye to much of the brutality in the camps, stealing from the Reich was unforgivable. Ilse was accused of embezzling over 700,000 Reichsmarks, though she was acquitted for lack of evidence. Karl, however, was not so lucky. In April 1945, as the war neared its end, he was executed by firing squad for embezzlement and the unauthorized murder of prisoners. Ilse, now a widow, remained at Buchenwald, living in the commandant's house and continuing her reign of terror until the camp's liberation. The liberation of Buchenwald and Ilse's arrest. As the Allies closed in on Nazi Germany, Buchenwald's prisoners took matters into their own hands. On April 8, 1945, using a secret shortwave transmitter, they sent a desperate Morse code message to General Patton's Third Army. To the Allies. To the Army of General Patton. This is the Buchenwald concentration camp. SOS. We request help. They want to evacuate us. The SS want to destroy us. 3 minutes later, they received a reply, hold out. Rushing to your aid. On April 11, 1945, the U.S. 6th Armored Division liberated Buchenwald, finding over 21,000 survivors, many so weak they could barely stand. The prisoners had thwarted an SS plan to destroy the camp and its inmates by deceiving Gestapo headquarters into believing the camp had already been blown up. When General Patton toured the camp, he was horrified by what he saw. Emaciated survivors, a crematorium filled with ashes, and a chilling display of Ilse's trophies. Lampshades and other items made from human skin, alongside preserved body parts and shrunken heads. Ilse had fled to Ludwigsburg, where her family lived, in the final months of the war. Her lifestyle of excess, marked by alcohol and sexual indulgence, strained her relationships, and her relatives attempted to strip her of custody of her 3 children. But before that could happen, U.S. authorities arrested her in June 1945. The stage was set for one of the most high-profile trials of the post-war era, the Buchenwald trial and Ilse's defiance. The Buchenwald trial began on April 11, 1947, at the former Dachau concentration camp, now an internment camp for Nazi war criminals. Ilse was the only woman among 31 defendants, standing trial for her role in the atrocities at Buchenwald. She denied everything, claiming she had no knowledge of the abuse, starvation, or medical experiments carried out in the camp. Her demeanor was defiant, portraying herself as a dutiful SS wife and mother, far removed from the horrors she was accused of orchestrating. The evidence, however, was overwhelming. Survivors testified about her sadistic behavior, from selecting tattooed prisoners for death to her brutal treatment of women and children. Witnesses described her collection of human skin artifacts and her perverse pleasure in humiliating prisoners. Yet, when sentences were handed down on August 14, 1947, Ilse's advanced pregnancy, her son Uwe was born in October 1947, fathered by another German prisoner, spared her the death penalty imposed on 22 of her co-defendants. Instead, she was sentenced to life imprisonment. Public outrage erupted when her sentence was commuted to 4 years, prompting a second trial by a German court in 1950. Over 7 weeks, 250 witnesses, including 50 for the defense, testified. For prosecution, witnesses confirmed Ilse's role in selecting tattooed prisoners and creating human skin artifacts. On January 15, 1951, the court sentenced her to life imprisonment once more. Ilse, absent from the courtroom due to health issues, continued to deny her guilt, petitioning for a pardon multiple times, all of which were rejected. The final years and a justified end. Ilse Koch's life behind bars was marked by delusion and paranoia. By the 1960s, she was convinced that Buchenwald survivors were coming for her, even claiming that the spirits of dead prisoners haunted her cell, demanding their skin back. Her mental state deteriorated further after her son Artwin, unable to bear the shame of his parents' crimes, took his own life in 1967. On September 1, 1967, at the age of 60, Ilse Koch ended her life, hanging herself with a bedsheet in her cell at Achach prison in Bavaria. Her body was buried in an unmarked grave, a fitting end for a woman whose name had become a byword for cruelty. No one mourned her passing. For the survivors of Buchenwald and the families of those she tormented, her death was a small measure of justice in the face of unimaginable horrors. Ilse Koch's story is a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the ideologies that enable it. Her actions at Buchenwald were not just the work of one sadistic individual but a reflection of a regime that dehumanized millions. Yet, the liberation of Buchenwald and the trials that followed showed the resilience of survivors and the determination to hold perpetrators accountable.